In 1881, at Deir el-Bahari, archaeologists discovered a hidden tomb containing dozens of royal mummies, including great pharaohs like Ramesses II. Amidst the gold and grandeur lay a plain cedar coffin. Inside was a body that defied all funerary norms. It wasn't posed in peaceful repose. It was a man locked in an eternal silent shriek, his mouth agape in a mask of pure agony. Unlike the other mummies, this one had no name inscribed on his wrappings, a spiritual death sentence in ancient Egypt, as a nameless soul could not enter the afterlife. He was designated simply as Unknown Man, wrapped in a ritually unclean sheepskin. He appeared to be a pariah, buried in haste and shame amongst the greatest kings of the 18th and 19th dynasties. When the bandages were removed, the horror intensified. Most mummies were carefully eviscerated and dried with natron. Unknown Man, however, was mummified with his organs intact. His skin was tight, his neck muscles were strained, and his hands were clenched. It looked as though he had been mummified alive, or at least in the throes of a violent, painful death. For a century, historians speculated on the identity of the screaming mummy. Was he a Hittite prince who died far from home, a disgraced official, or perhaps a victim of a ritual sacrifice? The lack of hieroglyphs made him a cipher, a silent witness to a dark chapter of Egyptian history that someone had tried very hard to erase from the official records forever. Modern CT scans and DNA testing in the 2010s finally provided a breakthrough. Genetic analysis linked Unknown Man to Pharaoh Ramesses III. This pointed toward a famous historical event, the Harem Conspiracy. Queen Tai, one of the pharaoh's wives, had plotted to assassinate the king to place her son, Prince Pentawr, on the throne instead of the rightful heir. Ancient records known as the Judicial Papyrus of Turin detail the trial of the conspirators. The plot was successful in mortally wounding Ramesses III, but the coup failed. The conspirators were caught and sentenced to death. Among those listed was a prince who was allowed to take his own life, a mercy usually granted to royals to avoid public, shameful execution. The DNA evidence suggests that the screaming mummy is indeed Prince Pentawr. The physical state of the mummy, the constricted throat, and the distended chest is consistent with death by strangulation or hanging. It is likely that after being forced to commit suicide, his body was quickly treated and buried without the traditional care given to a royal prince. The sheepskin wrapping was a deliberate insult. In the eyes of the Egyptian priests, sheep were ritually impure for a royal burial. By wrapping the prince in such a hide, they were marking him as a traitor for all eternity. It was a symbolic gesture that stripped him of his royal dignity, ensuring his spirit would wander the void as an outcast rather than a god. CT scans of Ramesses III's mummy revealed a deep, fatal gash across his throat, likely caused by a sharp blade. This confirmed that the Harem Conspiracy wasn't just a rumor, it was a bloody reality. The screaming mummy's agony was the direct result of a failed bid for power that ended in the murder of a father and the subsequent execution of a son. Scientists believe the screaming expression wasn't necessarily a result of the prince's actual screams at death. Instead, because the jaw wasn't bound shut during mummification, a standard practice gravity pulled the mouth open as the muscles decayed and the skin dried. However, the psychological impact remains. He looks like a man still suffering for his ancient crimes. In a typical mummification, the brain was removed through the nose. In Unknown Man, the brain remains inside the skull, shriveled and dry. This further proves the haste and low-quality nature of his preservation. The priests did the bare minimum to ensure the body didn't rot, but they denied him the intricate rituals necessary for a successful journey to the field of reeds. Despite his disgrace, why was he buried in the royal cache? Some believe a loyal relative, perhaps a brother who remained faithful to the throne, couldn't bear to see a prince left to the jackals. They may have tucked his plain coffin into the secret cache to protect the body from grave robbers, even if they couldn't restore his name or his status in the afterlife. The hands of the screaming mummy are positioned in a way that suggests they were bound during the mummification process. This is extremely rare and suggests that even in death, the prince was treated as a prisoner. The physical restraints of his execution were mirrored in his eternal wrappings, a permanent reminder of his failed rebellion against the divine pharaoh. For the archaeologists who first saw him, the screaming mummy was a haunting sight. His face is a visceral reminder that the people of the Nile were not just statues and hieroglyphs, but humans driven by ambition, jealousy, and fear. The scream bridges the gap of 3,000 years, conveying a sense of raw human emotion that few other mummies possess. The removal of his name was the most violent part of his punishment. To the Egyptians, if your name was spoken, you lived forever. By erasing Pentuer from his tomb, they intended to kill his soul. He was meant to be forgotten, a non-person. The fact that we now know his name and story through science is a modern irony the ancient judges never could have imagined. Modern forensic artists have used the mummy's skull to reconstruct Pentuer's face. He was a young man, likely in his late teens or early 20s, with strong features similar to his father. The reconstruction replaces the scream with a neutral expression, allowing us to see the prince not as a monster or a traitor, but as a person caught in a deadly game of palace politics. The Screaming Mummy is now one of the most popular exhibits at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. He continues to draw crowds, fascinate researchers, and spark debate. He has become a celebrity of the macabre, a status that would have horrified the ancient priests who tried so hard to hide his shamed body away in the dark crevices of the Theban cliffs. The story of the Screaming Mummy teaches us about the absolute power of the pharaoh and the brutal consequences of treason. It shows a society where religion and law were one, and where a crime against the king was a crime against the cosmic order. Pentuer's body is a physical manifestation of the mat balance being restored through the punishment of the wicked. As we look at the Screaming Mummy today, we see a snapshot of a single, terrible moment in time. He is a witness to the end of the New Kingdom's stability, a period of decline and internal strife. His silent mouth tells a story of a family at war with itself, a dynasty beginning to crumble under the weight of its own secrets and the blood of its own children. In the end, the Screaming Mummy has achieved a strange form of immortality. Though his burial was intended to be an end, he has outlived his judges and his father's empire. He remains a symbol of the enduring mystery of Egypt, a man forever frozen in a moment of transition. His silent cry echoing through the halls of history as a warning to all who seek power through blood.